Hello, and with a baby, you never know what you're getting. It could be a dud. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my evil red-haired co-host, Andrew Williams. How are we doing today, Andrew?
Yeah. And that's really all I have to say about that.
As enlightening and informative as ever. I don't know why I ask you that question every week, Andrew. Let me ask you another question. Have you played the video game Rollerdrome? I've been playing the hell out of this recently.
No, I don't know that I'm familiar with this Rollerdrome.
Rollerdrome. It's not new. It came out, 2-3 years ago on PlayStation. I think it's 4 and 5. But let me describe this game to you. Story-wise, it takes place in a dystopian future where people are forced to play a game of death for the entertainment of civilians. And the game is roller skating and shooting people, taking people out before they take you out. Like shooting the house players, and you're trying to survive to the next level.
So it's rollerball.
Yeah, so it sounds right up your alley, right? So it's rollerball. There's a little bit of Mad Max there with some of the level design. Running Man, yeah, and Tony Hawk, because you're skating. Literally, you do tricks to reload your weapons as you take out all the house players.
Also, Premium Rush, got it.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really good. It's got a super cool art style if you look at screenshots of it, but it's a fun little. I say little. It's sizable enough. It's not a tiny game. I know last week I recommended a game that was right up your alley, Return of the Obra Dinn. Hope you get a chance to check that one out. But this is another one that I've been playing recently. I played it a bit when it first came out, but I recently kind of got back into it. I was like, who would love this game? My buddy Andrew.
You're probably right. I will add it to the endless list and stack of things that I should definitely try out because I'm sure I'd enjoy them. So we will.
This is episode 179, I think, 180, somewhere around there. So we'll see what episode we're on whenever you go, hey, Chris, that game went on sale, and I
Turns
bought it. I played it. Well, you been doing any gaming recently, Andrew?
No, I play adult games like Fortnite.
Of course.
No, no, not really. I thought about dusting off. We mentioned the Dark Pictures anthology. I thought about dusting off one of those, but
really, because I didn't get a text message from you asking
Chris,
to get online.
You will notice the operative phrase there is considered. Right. And never got anywhere. I've been too busy playing. There's this kind of obscure sport. I'm not sure you're familiar with it. It's called hockey.
Okay, yeah.
It turns out that just is very time consuming, and it takes a lot of my time.
That's fair enough. Hey, it's physical. It's exercise. It's probably better than sitting on a couch playing a video game.
I had yesterday, the day before, and today off from hockey, and then I will play Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So I am getting my exercise in, and that is the only thing holding back my terrible diet. So, I'm getting there, but
you managed to find time to watch a movie this week.
I did.
And that's what we're here to talk about, because every week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release, and we challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's 0% month, and this week we are talking the 1990 film Problem Child. Andrew, what is your history with this movie? Is it something that you grew up watching? Have you seen it very often, or was this the first time jumping in?
It wasn't the first time. I've definitely seen it before, and I've definitely heard of it. I'm sure it was on TV. It's not something that was in the Williams family vault, to my knowledge. I have no feelings about this movie really at all. Haven't watched it in if I have not sat down to watch it possibly ever. I know I've seen pieces of it before, but I have not actively sought it out in over a decade. So I was very curious going back to it, because it is 0%, but this is a bit of a franchise. Like they get a
Yeah.
little bit, they get a little bit of mileage out of this.
3 movies and an animated series, I believe, which
Yeah,
is
so like
wild.
it's a very very odd uh I think there's even a scene in the remake of Cape Fear where this movie's playing. So like it's like a weird thing that like has like uh it's like I said, it's stuck around oddly. And I don't know. We'll see. But we'll talk
Well,
about it, but it is an odd thing.
it is one that I've seen a number of times. I mean, not in a long time. I saw it growing up. I I don't know if we had the VHS or I think I was maybe just catching it on TV, but I definitely saw it, like I said, multiple times. I don't remember every scene, but certain ones really stuck in my memory. The opening montage with the Bad to the Bone, the song "It's My Party and I Can Cry If I Want to." I know that song because of this movie. It's prominent in the birthday party scene, and some stuff stuck with me, some stuff didn't. And I've got to wonder as I'm researching this. Apparently, the TV cut is edited somewhat significantly. Man, we got a lot to talk about. One of those things is going to be the wild tone shifts this movie has. Some parts are very kid friendly and seem aimed towards entertaining 7-year-olds, and some things are extremely dark and they just swing from one side to the other. So I don't know how much of those dark scenes I saw as a kid, or if maybe it didn't register just how off-putting, shall we say, the things I was seeing was. I don't know, but it was a heck of a trip down memory lane revisiting this film. As I think I said last week, I remember liking this movie. Like, I liked it as a kid. It has a positive. I associate it with being a at least entertaining movie or happy memories. So seeing that had a 0%, watching it as an adult, I really didn't know what I was getting into, and I don't think I was prepared for what we saw. But we're gonna get to that. First, let's set the stage a little bit. This movie was released July 27th, 1990, made on a budget of $11 million. At the box office, it makes $72.2 million. This is a huge hit. That is, I mean, that's a respectable box office for any movie in 1990, but when you look at the budget of $11 million, this was a huge return on their investment. Hence, the franchise that followed. Of course, critically, it's not well received. It holds a 0% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score fares a bit better, of course, because it can't be worse. 42%, so still far from being fresh, but I did scroll through those reviews, and a lot of them are like, oh, this is the classic. I saw it on TV all the time. You know, the things that I was saying last week before I rewatched this movie, it seems to hold some kind of place in a lot of millennials' hearts just because we saw it a lot. It was around.
Yeah, it's kind of like a movie like we mentioned Bushwhack before, the
Yeah.
Daniel Stern vehicle. It's like that was everywhere when I was a kid. Like if it was on HBO, it was on television, it was everywhere. Like, but you think about like, have you seen the movie Bushwhacked show up anywhere in the last 15 years? No.
Have you ever seen it on
No.
Blu-ray?
Right. Like, and if it is, it's not in best. It's not formally at Best Buy. It's not a Target. It's nowhere. Like it's not a thing that you find anywhere. And like it's very very strange that it's we talk about the loss of like the $30 million movie. We talk about the loss of a lot of different things. There was this time where like even if your movie was not well received, because like I don't know what Bushwhack's Rotten Tomatoes score is. We probably have looked it up before. One day we may talk about it. I don't know if we want to talk about attempts at making Daniel Stern a leading man. Hashtag PP. But it's
That's
something
that's
where like
the title of the whole month. Attempts
yeah,
at making Daniel
and
Stern
it's
a leading man, and it's that and what Celtic Pride.
Celtic Pride,
how many
and
times did they try it?
I can't think of I don't even know if I could think of another movie that they've done that he was in that worked like that. But there was this other life to him, and it kind of Matt Damon was talking about how like if your movie didn't come out and do well, it was fine because your video sales would be like this second box office. where like you'd have all the rental stores would buy copies, and then the stores would buy all their copies, and it became this kind of second life for the movie. Syndication was actually kind of another piece of that, where like, and that still sort of happens, I guess, but nowadays everybody's just dumping stuff on their own platforms. The idea of like selling the rights to syndication is almost completely unheard of now. The idea that you'd sell the rights to TNT or Turner Broadcasting and they'd show it on TNT and TBS forever. Also, Bushwhacked is an 18%. So it fared better at making him a leading man than this one did for John Ritter, I guess. But anyway, but it's a weird thing to look back on all those movies that were like staples of our childhood that were all on TV all the time, and then just to realize that they've all but essentially disappeared. Like we still remember them like in the recesses of our brain, but like the culture has moved beyond them. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but like it's very odd to just know that there's a time where like anything almost would become profitable eventually, whether it was syndication, whether it was video sales, whatever. And nowadays the streaming model has all but done the reverse, where almost nothing has a chance now. Back in the day, I guess the point is that back in the day, whatever, like there was a time where it felt like they would do everything possible to make sure a movie made money. Where nowadays it feels like it's kind of the opposite, where the minute it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, they just kind of take it out back and bury it in a hole and move on.
Sometimes they do that before it's even released.
There's a movie where Michael Keaton is Batman, J.K. Simmons is Commissioner Gordon, and Brendan Fraser is Firefly, and I'm never going to see it.
There's a movie where my favorite comedic actor is defending Wile E. Coyote in a courtroom, and every now and then I hear a story that it might be coming, but as of right now, it is canned, and I will not forgive this. But also, Andrew, while you were talking, I had to round up our Daniel Stern month, Rookie of the Year. I think we can also slide that in there. But are you familiar with the famous internet troll Ken M?
Not by name. Let me see if I can.
He was mostly active on things like, what's it called, Quora or Yahoo. What was it called? Yahoo Pages, Ask Pages, like old people internet forum type things. But
sure,
he's great because he's like very wholesome. Like it's never mean spirited. And there's this article that says Daniel Stern calls his Rookie of the Year character off the bench to support the Chicago Cubs as of 2016. So he went to a Chicago Cubs game as his character. Ken M responds, he says, "True story. In 1991, when Daniel Stern was super famous for being at home alone, my wife and I veered off the road during a thunderstorm and popped our tire on the curb. Out of nowhere, a stranger pulled up and insisted on changing our tire in the rain while we stayed warm and dry in the car." So someone responds and says, "Was it him?" And Kidham says, "We never got a chance to find out. He was wearing a hooded rain jacket that obscured his face and left with nothing more than a friendly wave goodbye."
Could have been anyone.
Highly recommend just Google image Ken M. It's great. That's how you troll on the internet, people. Let's take a look at the creative team on this movie. It's written by the writing duo of Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. Very, very interesting filmography, Andrew. This is their first feature film. They also write Problem Child 2. And then they start doing what they would become known for, which they call the anti-biopic, like biographies about people you don't normally think would have a biography about them. Movies like Ed Wood, The People vs. Larry Flint, and Man on the Moon, also Big Eyes. But also woven through there, they wrote That Darn Cat, the remake from the 90s that no one remembers, and Agent Cody Banks. So they're really just all over the place, from like prestigious critic darling films to 0% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever Agent Cody Banks has on Rotten Tomatoes.
I mean, yeah, and even mixed in there is like a Stephen King adaptation with 1408, and even you talk about the anti-biopic Dolomite Is My Name was a big semi-hit for Eddie Murphy about 5 years ago, where he plays Rudy Ray Moore, which that was them. So throughout their entire careers, they've gone back to that biopic with Ed Wood. Ed Wood is 94, People versus Larry Flint's 96, Man on the Moon 99, Big Eyes in 2014, and then Dolomite in 2019. So I guess there's some, and there is some repeated people in there. They obviously Tim Burton on Ed Wood and Big Eyes, and then Milos Forman on the People versus Larry Flint and Man on the Moon. Then Agent Cody Banks thrown in the middle of it. And they also actually are apparently creators on the television show American Crime Story, which is a kind of weird sort of spin-off of Ryan Murphy's like American Horror Story type stuff. This is American Crime Story. They apparently were the creators on the first season, which was the season about O.J. Simpson, where if you go to YouTube, you can find one of my favorite videos, which is David Schwimmer's Robert Kardashian endlessly saying juice, because that's what OJ chooses to be called. So it's literally a supercut of David Schwimmer just going, Juice, your Uncle Juice. Juice needs this. We got to be there for Juice. We got to be there for your Uncle Juice. It's amazing. But
that I need to watch.
It's, anyway, like you said, a very odd career that I was not expecting when I looked up the movie Problem Child. So, and they do return for Problem Child too. So all the more power to him.
The movie's directed by Dennis Dugan. Now, this is also his feature debut. Shortly after this, directs Brain Donors, which I don't know if you've seen that one, Andrew, but it is such a genuine, earnest Three Stooges homage. Like, they're doing Three Stooges comedy and gags in an early 90s movie that, for me personally, I can't help but love it.
That's John Turturro's in that one, right?
Is he? I haven't seen it in so long. I probably didn't know who John Turturro was when I saw it. Might be time to revisit. He directs Happy Gilmore, which gets him on the Adam Sandler train. Goes on to direct Big Daddy and lots of other Adam Sandler stuff. Woven in there, we have Beverly Hills Ninja and a personal favorite of mine, and Andrew, I know you're a fan, Saving Silverman.
Yes. Again, but as you so like it's funny because of all of his movies, you can see that like so many of them are just in the Sandler sphere basically. There's
we've said it before, Andrew.
In.
Good work if you can get it.
Nice work if you can get. I mean, if Adam Sandler called me today and said, "Hey, do you want to come to Maui with me and shoot a movie and direct a movie starring me and my friends?" I would be like, and pay me, 8 figures to do it. Yeah. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do that. And then when it goes perfectly flawlessly with no problems and he invites me to do it again, I'm going to do it again. Like, why wouldn't I?
And are you going to care what the critics say about that film?
Absolutely not, because I'm going to be sitting in my big old house with nothing to worry about. Anyway, it's funny. If you look at it's Happy Gilmore in 96, Beverly Hills Ninja, which is not like in necessarily the Sandler sphere, but it's definitely adjacent, I think.
The SNL yeah, sure.
Yeah. And then it's Big Daddy, Bench Warmers, which again, Sandler's not in that, but it's adjacent. I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, You Don't Mess with Zohan's, Grown Ups 2, Jack and Jill, just go like he's directed more Adam Sandler movies than anything else. But then there's, like we said, weird stuff in there. Obviously, Problem Child, Brain Donors, and then even like 4 years ago, he did like a weird romantic comedy that's got none of those people in it, but it was like Diane Keaton and Jeremy Irons and Maggie Grace and Diego Boneta, and like a really weird, like Prestige kind of intended to be this big, like throwback romantic comedy that nobody saw. So who knows when he'll be getting back into the Sandler
Sandbox.
Verse, I'm sure the
back
Sandbox.
The
There
Sandbox.
it is. That's have we said that before? Or did you just
I don't know
right now?
I was just off the dome.
There's
Sandler,
no way
if you're
that
out
somebody
there,
hasn't done that before.
you can trademark
there's
this.
No way.
Send me some royalties.
But
the Sandbox.
Anyway, again, perfectly. Like I said, this man never has to worry about money for the rest of his life, and good for him.
Andrew, let's do this. Let's jump into this film. Talk about all the positives, everything we like about the film Problem Child. Are you ready?
Yes.
Junior is a 7-year-old orphan that has been adopted and returned 30 times in his life. His 31st adoption is by Ben and Flo, a couple that are desperate for a child. Ben is eager to bond with his young son, while Flo is excited by the social opportunities being a parent can bring. But when Junior starts a fire in the house, ruins a young girl's birthday party, and invites a serial killer to their home, Ben and Flo realize they are over their heads and want to return Junior to the orphanage. Before that can happen, the serial killer Junior befriended kidnaps Flo and Junior, and Ben must save the child he once wanted to abandon. Andrew, is that the synopsis of a comedy? Or
no, absolutely not. It is 100% not.
It's a weird thing, Andrew.
It's a very weird thing, and like, it's one of those things that, like, I don't know. Like, it's just so, like, watching it back, I was like, this is a strange movie. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, but like, this movie is like not what I think it is, or it's not even like what I remembered it as. I was like, oh, it's just a fun, light comedy
100%, yeah.
The kid you can't, like a Dennis the Menace kind of thing. Like, they made a Dennis the Menace movie not long after this, but like, I was like, yeah, it just, like, I assumed something like that, where like, oh, the kid gets up to some hijinks and we're like, aw, shucks, like, I'll leave it to Beaver. But no, this kid is like vile for huge chunks of this movie. It's like,
that's
wow.
exactly how I remembered it, like a family comedy. Yeah, Little Rascals, Home Alone, like that vein of comedy. Like Christopher Columbus could have directed this. I thought it was in my brain. But that's not how it was written and intended. It was intended to be a satire of this type of movie. A movie where a child comes into an adult's life and changes them for the better by bonding and learning to love the child. It is a straight up parody of that type of film. Again, how it was intended. But after disastrous screen testing, there was reshoots and retooling by the production studio to try and force it to be a family comedy. But they don't take out the really dark stuff. So you end up with this weird mishmash of like very dark jokes and then super goofy hijinks where like a nurse with a big mole on her forehead has a pan fall on her head with a funny sound effect. Like it goes back and forth between those two. Not gracefully, but I gotta say, hashtag PP, Positive Podcast, what we're here for. I laughed multiple times in this movie. A lot of jokes land for me, and I will be happy to talk about those, regardless of what the end result of this movie ends up being. It is a wild ride. Andrew, as you were nice enough to share with me, it's free on YouTube. Like, legitimately free on YouTube. Like, YouTube's movie service lets you watch this for free, so nothing illegal about it. It's actually like a decent quality and picture and everything. Yeah. I was very happy to see. I selected it on YouTube and it said there's two options to watch: free or rent for $3.99. I chose free.
Guys, I chose free.
If you want to watch this, there you go. Go to YouTube. But before we jump into the scenes of this film, Andrew, gotta talk about the cast. And of course, we gotta start with the high point: best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award for Problem Child?
There's a lot of interesting people in this movie. A lot of people doing some interesting things, but I'm going to go with what I see as the emotional center of the film. I'm going to be going John Ritter as Ben Healy Jr. I think he's got this really interesting spot that he's got to sit in where, like, he really doesn't, like, he's this nice, kind, compassionate person, and everybody kind of hates him for it. Like, his wife doesn't really respect him. His dad loathes him for it.
Yeah.
And like straight up, like, it's a sign of weakness. All throughout the movie, it's something that is consistently taken advantage of by the people around him. And the moment that he thinks he's going to kind of crack, He gets brought back, and I'll talk about that when we get to scenes. But
I would argue he does crack, by the
he
way,
does,
which is
Um,
hashtag PP.
but he comes back.
It's my problem with the movie, but
Yeah, it's. I was trying to smooth past it.
okay, all right,
but
all right. We'll get there. We'll
it's
get
tough.
there.
This was apparently a part that there was a lot of people in the running for this. A lot of different people that were considered. A lot of 80s dad type guys: Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Richard Dreyfuss, Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Kurt Russell. Apparently, imagine this movie with Kurt Russell as the dad. That would have been so strange. But I think he does a good job kind of holding this movie in its center, kind of being, barely one of the only likable characters in the movie at times. Hashtag PP.
Yes.
And I mean, to be fair, I don't think the movie wants a lot of these characters to be likable.
By design, for
it's
sure.
not.
Yeah.
It's designed for him to be the one that's kind of to kind of go with. I think he does a good job sitting in that spot. I like the scenes towards the end where he kind of finally stands up for himself, stands up to his dad. And I think all of that really works. Like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more with scenes. But otherwise, John Ritter. Obviously, John Ritter is, a lot of people know John Ritter from some various thing. For a lot of people, it's possibly It, the TV miniseries It, where he played the adult version of Ben Hanscom. 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Daughter. He showed up on a whole bunch of different stuff. Anything that you were on any television show that he's a guest star on. He was in a bunch
Three's
of movies.
Company.
Three's Company, obviously, going to be a big thing for a lot of people, but very tragically passed away very suddenly, and it was very unfortunate. And you saw the kind of outpouring that came after that, and you could definitely see just how beloved he was by everyone. Just kind of even further cementing just how unfortunate it was and how loved he was. So,
man, it was brutal. I remember that very vividly. By the way, John Ritter, yes, also my Mark Strong Award winner. That was a pretty easy pick for me on this movie. Probably technically the first thing I saw him in was maybe Sling Blade. Watched that in I don't know, early high school or whatever. But I didn't like that at the time. That was a big deal. It's a very dramatic role, a serious movie, breaking from convention for John Ritter. He's playing an openly gay character, and it was again a big feather in his cap for that point in his career. And kind of relaunches this new wave of his career. And then I remember watching 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. My whole family watched it. That was just one of our sitcoms that we watched. And then he died. And I was doing the research for this episode. He only completed 1 season of that. I think he's in the first 3 episodes of season 2 for the Kill Him Off. In my brain, it was 3 or 4 seasons.
He was on that show for years. It's so weird.
I was because I said, that's my main connection to him, watching him on that every week. And I can't believe it was just a little over a season. But I remember him dying suddenly and just being heartbroken. And they did this big special on, I think, ABC, I think was the channel that 8 Simple Rules is on. And I just cried my eyes out the entire hour-long special as everyone talks about how lovely he was and how funny he was. I remember, this is always stuck with me. He was on... It must have been Conan, because that's about the only late night I ever watched. And he was telling the story about there's this scene in Three's Company where he jumps over the couch, and while the show was in syndication, they realized that his shorts reveal his testicles when he jumps over. So they had to edit the episode for Nick at Night. They, edited that out. And John Ritter says, but I said they should just sometimes air the edited version and sometimes leave it in, because sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't. And he had this big cheesy smile on his face. Yep. It was just a perfectly delivered dad joke. And he has that dad energy down so well. Obviously, again, 8 Simple Rules, that's my biggest connection to him. But even this movie, it's all about, he just desperately wants to be a dad, wants to love this kid and bond with this kid, and he does it so well. I mean, he is the emotional center of this movie. My favorite parts are just how much he wants to love this kid. It's We'll get to when we get to scenes. They push that so far past a breaking point. We'll get there. But whenever it is going for that genuine emotion, he absolutely nails it. Love his performance. Love John Ritter. R.A.P. Way too soon. He was only 54 years old. Absolutely tragic, but left behind an impressive body of work. This performance included, I will say, even despite what else is happening in this film. Andrew, this movie is where John Ritter meets his future wife, Amy Yasbeck. She plays his wife in the movie, named Flo. And the entire time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I know this woman. I've seen this actor somewhere else.
You have.
The Mask is where I know her from. She's the red-haired reporter that, I haven't rewatched The Mask in a while.
That is absolutely not what I thought you were going to say.
Really? Is there something more? Yeah, don't reveal it yet. Is there something more obvious than The Mask, you think?
For me, there's two things that I would think of before The Mask, simply because I don't think she's a very big, part of The Mask. I don't think she's.
Well, I saw that movie a million times. That is absolutely where I know her face. And I haven't rewatched The Mask in a long time. In my brain, I'm thinking, should Stanley Ipkiss had ended up with her instead of Cameron Diaz? But I don't know. I'll go back and watch and report back. Man, what a horrible position he was in between those two women. Andrew, what movie do you think of before The Mask for Amy?
Clearly House 2, The Second Story. No. Okay. But no.
Well, I mean, beyond the title, I can't say I'm very familiar.
No. She's made Marion in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is what I saw all the time as a kid. So the Mel Brooks Robin Hood movie.
With the chastity belt?
Yes.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, but that movie. But also, she plays Mina in Dracula Dead and Loving It, which is another Mel Brooks.
I enjoy both those movies.
Those two movies are in my head. So I see those before I see The Mask, because I think of The Mask, I think of Cameron Diaz, I think of Jim Carrey. That's who my brain goes to for The Mask. I forgot she was in it until you mentioned it just now. I was like, oh, he's gonna say Men in Tights. He's gonna say Dracula Dead and Loving It. I was like, that's what he's gonna say. And then you were like, The Mask, and I was like, what? No, but she was also on Wings for the last couple of seasons. That's John Ritter ended up guest starring as her estranged husband on Wings itself, which was a spinoff of. Or Wings, I guess, is in the same universe as Cheers and Frasier, because Kelsey Grammer got an Emmy for playing the same character on 3 different shows. That's how that worked. But Wings was one of them. But that's and she actually is in Problem Child too. She just plays a completely different character, which I think
Andrew, despite everything we've said about this movie, I want to watch Problem Child 2 because I can't believe it has the same writers, because we talked about the conflict with the tone they were going for and how it got rewritten. I can't believe they brought him back for the second movie. And yeah, the fact that Amy's in it again, I think as John Ritter's new love interest. I think I read that synopsis, but as you said, an entirely different character. Wow. I've got to see how they pull that off.
Yeah, it's wild, but yeah, so she's not particularly likable here. She's nope. That's kind of the point. She's meant to be kind of what's the nice way of putting it?
Materialistic.
Materialistic. She's very vain. She's very all about appearances, that sort of thing, and she kind of wants the image of being the great wife and the great mother without having to actually do any of the work. And she does a pretty good job with that.
Problem Child 2 is not free to watch on YouTube, so I will not be watching it.
It's also not 0%. Odd.
I was going to watch it for fun, Andrew, not for work.
I know, but if we ever do a 7% month, then it can be done.
We, of course, have to talk about Michael Oliver, who plays Junior in this movie, the titular problem child. A good performance, very good child performance. He reminds me, I mentioned Little Rascals earlier, the way he delivers these lines, he feels like he's right out like the original Our Gang shorts, like 1930s, 1940s Hollywood. I don't know what it is about just his enunciation. I I would say gosh gee Willikers, but this kid is like evil, so he wouldn't say gosh gee Willikers. But like the way he delivers his lines feels like old Hollywood to me, like a fun throwback.
Yeah, like he got compared to like Opie, Ron Howard's character from the Andy Griffith Show, and that's like it's a very apt comparison.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, doing a great job. He's got to play evil for most of the movie, but also there's some heart underneath. This kid wants to be loved. I mean, John Ritter nails it early on. He's like, this kid has been unloved his entire life. Of course he acts this way. We need to love him until we get through to him. And that's what they end up doing. But it takes a long time for that like vulnerable side to come out in this kid, but he plays both sides very well. The menace and the little child that just wants to be loved. Good stuff.
It is good. Macaulay Culkin reportedly auditioned for this. That seems strange to me until I remember this was around the time of Home Alone, and he is age appropriate, I guess. Right. But they ended up going for the Michael Oliver, and then Macaulay Culkin would go on to do The Good Son. So he would get his evil child movie. His just has somehow an even darker tone than this. But yeah, it's I can't imagine having to do something like this as like a child actor. This has got to be like a tough one where you have to like shift between all these things because man, some of the stuff they make this kid do. And don't get me wrong, like it's obviously acting, it's obviously movie magic, but like this kid's mean, like straight up like awful. And it's almost tough to watch sometimes with just you're like, man, this is an actual kid that had to do all this. But it is pretty wild. And you mentioned the kind of the shift in tone, and apparently the story had been pitched a couple of different ways, and it did get pitched kind of as much more of like a horror film like The Omen or like Bad Seed, about this idea that a kid had been returned from the adoption agency so many times, but they were the ones that thought it had potential as a comedy, but kind of saw it as like a dark satire of things like Look Who's Talking or whatever. And it ends up being this weird mishmash of both, where like it's never really fully committed to being like it's never over the top enough to be satire, or like it's too mean to be satire, but it's not nice enough to be genuine. Like it sits in this very weird spot.
Yeah.
And as such,
it tries to have its cake and eat it too, for sure.
Right. Like it's very odd, but anyway, the kid has to do a lot because of that, because of the strange tone, because of the way it all shifts around. He's got to do a lot, and I think he's up to the task by and large.
Jack Warden plays Big Ben. This is John Ritter's character's dad, who owns a Academy-esque store or franchise, but is selling it rather than passing it on to his son. As you said, very disappointed in his son. Disappointed that they adopted. Andrew, we talk a lot about bullies in movies are just so mean in a way that like kids are mean, but they're not that mean. Like you see, and like everyone's view of adoption in this movie is insane. Like everyone thinks that it's like a disgusting act and
terrible.
Horrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. And again, you're not supposed to like most of these characters, but the mom Flo was like, I don't wear secondhand clothes and I don't want a secondhand child. And it's like,
oh my god. Apparently that's some of the stuff that got cut for television because they thought it was too mean. All the stuff about adoption, and it's awful. Jack Warden, alum of the show, I believe. We did The Replacements, right?
We did.
He's the owner in Replacements. Yeah. Obviously, just a legendary actor as well. He's been in things like Brit parts and things like The Asphalt Jungle and Sunset Boulevard, but then appearances in movies like Heaven Can Wait and Shampoo, where he got nominated for Academy Awards, all the way through to his last movie and last performance, The Replacements. So we're just slowly diving into this man's career over time. But he's so just, again, he's off-putting. And it's the design. He's supposed to be off-putting. But man, do you not want to listen to this? Like, he's just mean. And obviously he does essentially get his just desserts by the end of this film. But like, it's one of the things where like, it's tough to watch him. And I'm just like, man, this guy is awful. Like, and again, it's by design, but it's bad.
Andrew, I would love to talk about the performance of Martin Beck, the bow tie killer, sort of a quirky serial killer character, but he's played by someone responsible for one of the most public racist rants of all time. So we're not going to sit here and say anything nice about him.
Yeah, then no. I have nothing to say about Michael Richards.
But we will, of course, talk about Gilbert Gottfried, who plays the character of Igor Peabody. Igor, is that what they call him? I see him call him Peabody. But this, and again, I think I said it last week, going in this movie, this is one of the strongest memories I have, that Gilbert Gottfried is in Problem Child. And I said it, I was like, I'm going to be surprised by how little he's in the movie. He's got 2 scenes, I think, maybe 2.5, but not in it very much, but very memorable. Gosh, golly, I love Gilbert Gottfried. Absolutely hilarious. A comedian's comedian. I mean, this is one of those rare things where, like, he plays, in a sense, the same character in everything, but like never drops the character or the persona. But it's not like a character like Pee-wee. It's just his public comedic persona. There's a fantastic documentary, I think it's just called Gilbert, that is, of course, absolutely heartbreaking now because he has passed away, but it is like this rare look into like his actual life and personal life. It's all about how much he loves his young children and how hard he still works and how much he still, or at the time, toured, and how hilariously frugal he was, despite being obviously very well off from all of his work, would still do things like take the travel shampoo from the hotels. Very delightful look into this man's life and career. Interesting career because he's like late in his career, turns very adult in his delivery, in his overall comedic style, but also, of course, does family movies like this and Aladdin. But yeah, I've always been a fan of Gilbert Gottfried, and he's got like an objectively annoying delivery, but it's still, he managed to make it work, and more power to him. Hilarious here, has some of my favorite lines. We'll get to it when we get to scenes, but if he was in the movie more, would certainly be vying for that Mark Strong Award.
Yeah, my brain made me think he was in this movie a lot more than he is, and he's not. He's, like you said, he's literally in like 2.5 scenes. There's a scene where like they're at the adoption agency, and there's a scene where they go back to the adoption agency, and I think there's maybe one other little bit, but otherwise,
he's at the orphanage.
Yeah,
I think it's the other one.
Yeah, and so like there's really not that much to it, but yeah, Gilbert Gottfried is an acquired taste, and even like it's literally like the adult stuff is not old. Like in 1991, he got in trouble because he was making a bunch of jokes about Paul Rubin's recent arrest that were very adult themed, and that was 1991 during the Emmy Awards. So like he's definitely like leaned into that kind of weird, that kind of edgy humor with that very, very particular voice. Obviously Aladdin, I think, is what a lot of people associate him with from our generation, just that voice. He was also Mr. Mixie-Spitlick on Superman the Animated Series, which he was perfect for. If they ever made, 20 years ago, he'd have been perfect to play a live action version of that character, because I don't know if you guys know this about Gilbert Gottfried. He also looks kind of weird, but he's so seeing him run around in the bowler hat just terrorizing Superman would have been absolutely perfect. But
I've never heard that name pronounced. That's how you say that?
That's how they say it in that show, which is how I've always assumed it is.
Mixplick?
Mixie-Spitlick.
Oh, okay.
There's no vowels in it.
I've seen it written out, but I just haven't attempted to say it.
I can say it backwards better. Because that's how you get rid of him, is you say his name backwards. Cliptozixum. But there you go, folks. Now you've
someone listening understood that reference and laughed.
They did. Anyway, he's like I said, a man that's not shied away from controversy. He's shown up at a great many roasts of famous people to offer his insight into them, and has ultimately sometimes run into that. And like that documentary you mentioned, kind of doesn't run away from any of it. It kind of leans into all of it and talks about it and kind of lets him kind of give his perspective. And in a lot of cases, it feels like there is some growth where he's like, maybe it wasn't the right thing at the time, or in some cases he thought it was the right thing, or it was, there shouldn't be anything off limits. Doesn't really run away from it. And so I can respect that to a degree, but here he is full on 100% Gilbert Gottfried supporting character in the 90s. Like that's 100% what this is, and he's leaning into it, doing all of his eccentricities, and yeah. It's what you expect from him.
I highly recommend on YouTube, after you've watched Problem Child for free, and after you've watched the Juice Supercut, that you watch Gilbert Gottfried on Hollywood Squares. Just search Gilbert Gottfried Hollywood Squares, You Fool. And it is, if you're familiar with Hollywood Squares, the contestants pick a celebrity. The celebrity gets asked a question. The celebrity answers it, and they have to decide if they gave the right answer or not. And I swear about 8 times in a row, he gives his answer, and they say, I'm going to agree or not agree. And they are wrong every single time. And he'll say the answer very confidently. They're like, yeah, that sounds right. And he goes, you fool! And he gets them like, the joke is funnier every single time that he gets to say it. But I think of that line quite often. You fool!
You fool!
He delivers it very well. Check it out. Andrew, let's jump into this movie. Let's talk about the scenes of this film. And let's start with the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of Problem Child?
For me, it's kind of, this is kind of a twofer. It's a little bit cheating. But I like the scene where John Ritter realizes that that the problem child, such as he is, Junior, actually likes him. I thought it was, they run through it really fast, and I feel like this definitely needed a little bit more time to breathe, but the message of it, I think, really works. And then it segues into John Ritter standing up to his dad for the first time, kind of the whole movie. But basically, at this point, Junior and Flo are both gone, kidnapped by the bowtie killer. And Ben, in one of his breaking moments, kind of sees this as a good thing. He's like, good, I'm done with it. It's over. It's finished. Talk about the character actually breaking, and he does. But he kind of is tearing apart the room. And he finds all these drawings. And he sees how Junior sees all of these adults that have been mean to him his whole life, but then there's a picture of him and he looks just like a normal person, and he realizes, oh, he doesn't see me like he sees everybody else, and he realizes there's some hope there. And then he goes and drives immediately to his dad's sporting goods store where he's about to do a commercial. He's about to go on television for his campaign. And he stands up to him, and his dad is again being really, really awful to him. But at this point, he's not having it. He stands back up to him, says he quits as his son. But then the last thing he does before he leaves is he turns the camera on so that Big Ben Sr.'s rant about how much he hates everybody actually is seen by all of the voters in the town, arguably killing his campaign in the process. But, modern events have shown me differently, but it's
well, he just tells it like it is, Andrew,
and then shows you his butt. But which is just a weird thing for a father to do to his son, just objectively. But anyway, this sequence of events that kind of from the realization into standing up to his dad, that's my favorite kind of sequence in this film. It's where I think John Ritter kind of, reaches the full part of his arc in this movie. And I think he does a good job selling that. So I'm picking that for my favorite scene of the movie.
That's good. That's a good pick, because this is, like I said, we have two movies kind of at war with each other. And one of them is the kid does family-friendly hijinks, but he's just a handful, but the family learns to love him, and this is the big reconciliation. This is like the climax of that movie, and I think that's a great pick. Whenever he realizes like you said, he likes me. He sees the drawing. He likes me, and he's got to do what he can to save this kid. That's great. That's just working for me. John Ritter rules at those deliveries. Now, as you said, could it have used more time to breathe? Sure. Would it have been more impactful if 30 seconds ago he hadn't just said, "Goodbye, Junior. Goodbye, Flo. I'm so happy to see you grow," after they were kidnapped by a serial killer? Yeah. In a different movie, kind of bit more impactful than it was here. But regardless, the performance is there, the thought is there, the sentiment is there. And so I think this is a good pick. And it's just so satisfying, especially for his dad, to get that comeuppance. And Junior and John Ritter, they've got some like genuine, great emotional connections a few times throughout this movie. And this certainly leads to a few of the good ones. So, Andrew, good pick. Good pick. I'm going to go with the scene that probably has stuck with me the most over the years, and I think is a pretty good encapsulation, again, of one half of what this movie was trying to be, and it's the young girl's birthday party that they go to, where Junior ends up wreaking havoc. But this one works for me a lot because sometimes Junior does horrible things because he's just evil. I mean, yeah, people have been mistreating him his whole life. That's part of it. Yeah, but sometimes there doesn't seem to be much motive there other than he just likes to be really dangerous. But at this particular birthday party, he's getting picked on by the other kids for being adopted. And I'm not saying they have all this stuff coming, but you kind of get it. You kind of understand, you kind of see firsthand some of the motivation or some of maybe the reasons why this kid is the way he is. First off, he's dressed like the devil, even though I don't think this is a costume party. I don't really know why he's dressed like the devil. But he does basically just a lot of pranks to this girl on her birthday because she said he's not a real kid. He's adopted, which is an incredibly mean thing to say, and all the kids laugh at him. But he does things like pop all the balloons with his pitchfork. He throws all the presents. What's he throw them like in a pool? He takes a frog that he finds in a fountain, puts it in the punch bowl. And then the most horrific thing that he does, he gets the piñata, he dumps the candy out, and he gets jars of like olives and pickles from the fridge and pours them into the piñata. And just thinking about like pickle juice soaking into a paper mache and confetti concoction, and then it bursting open out in the hot sun. Andrew, imagine the smell. That's gonna stain.
Oh man,
that's gonna linger for weeks on end.
That's not coming out. That's gonna be there forever. And woof.
This is really pushing the parents to a breaking point because up until then, a lot of his mischief has kind of been behind their back, and they haven't seen him be like outright mean. But this one, there's no denying or no escaping it. And I think this is a good middle act for, again, one of the stories that this movie is trying to tell. And just, again, the song, "It's My Party and Cry If I Want To," and they sync it up with the girl actually crying. It's good. It's a fun scene, and it serves the story, and it's always stuck with me, and I'm going to say it's my favorite of the movie.
I think it's a good pick. It's definitely, I think, where the problem child concept is at its peak. This is obviously the scene where he's probably doing, I guess maybe the scene where he drives a car through his dad's sports shop, his grandpa's sports shop, whatever. But this is the one where it feels like the most personal, emotional damage is done to a single person, which
yes.
They started it. That's the tough part. But like, also at the same time, they're kids. You would assume they don't know any better, but then the adults repeat it all. So you're just like, oh, I guess not. Guys, this movie's weird, but but I think it's a good pick. Obviously, this is where the hijinks are at their highest. This is where the damage is at its highest. This is where essentially all of that is kind of brought to the forefront, and this is really where he pushes too far. Really goes too far. And yeah, it's a great encapsulation of that.
Andrew, another scene that always stuck with me is the opening of this movie. It's a montage set to the song "Bad to the Bone," which, did I see this or Terminator first? This is probably where I know that song from first. And it's a montage of him being left at a doorstep as a baby, as a newborn. But whenever the mom comes to the door, this very rich, wealthy house, the baby pees on her. And the next scene is that woman's housekeeper dropping him off at another house. And this seemingly goes on and on and on. He keeps getting dropped off in the same manger to different households as we make our way down like the social classes. And he gets older and older. He's like 6 years old, getting dropped off. His legs are hanging off like out of the baby carrier that he's in. It is very dark. I mean, it's obviously meant to be just fun and jokey. You got the Bad to the Bone song playing, but this is the first time in my comments I wrote, this is extremely dark. Like, people just giving this kid up over and over again. And this is really, from the beginning, the start of the strange tone that this movie is going for at times. There was a part where at one of the houses he's at, there's a cat, and he pours detergent into the cat bowl. I'm like, he's gonna kill this cat. Like, this is gonna be a joke where like he pours detergent and the next scene is the cat like dead. They don't get that far. The cat burps and bubbles come out, so I guess it's not so bad. But I was preparing for it very early on in this movie. Something that dark. They really set the tone with this opening.
Yeah, even that like first montage of him being like brought to the first home, it's almost like a horror movie. Like the way it's shot and the way it's presented. Like it's this like it's like raining, it's dark, it's night. There's like
special effects lightning. Like it's like, really heavy-handed.
Like, and it's this giant massive house, and like it's this solemn person walking up with like without any sense of urgency. It's going like a real like almost Exorcist vibe is what it's going for, which is encapsulated later when you see John Ritter's character reading The Exorcist after he crashes the car through his dad's sports shop. Great book. But it's I just noticed that first thing. I like the first sequence. I was just like, wait, what's happening here? Like, it's so weirdly like it's almost like it's a like almost like a werewolf thing. Like there's a wolf howling. Like it's very strange stuff. And then turns out just a kid that, and then that's the scene where then he pees on the woman and she's like, oh, this is terrible. And it's like he's a
I can't keep a baby that pees, that urinates. Control your bladder, newborn.
What a jerk.
Do you think when they wrote Bad to the Bone, like in a notebook, they wrote bad?
Did George Thorogood do that? I don't know.
Correct, yeah.
Or
you think he discovered that in studio? Guys, I'm gonna try something.
I could go either way, because you know the song "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet" by Bachman Turner Overdrive, where he also does a whole bunch of stuttering. Like, he came up with all the stuttering for that song, and then he recorded a version without the stuttering, and was like, "This is not nearly as good."
I don't know if I know that. I was thinking of "My Generation" by The Who, which also does some stuttering. Which that's the only song he does it in. I don't know why they do it, but it is cool. But yeah.
You've definitely heard "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet." You may not know it by like name, but
we'll sing it, Andrew.
I can't sing it. I'm not going to do it. And I'll send you a link. But
okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's but the version on the movie, it's not by George Thorogood, is it?
This is the version I know, so I don't know. Is this a cover?
No, it is. It is.
Okay.
It's the song. Okay, no. The Beach Boys do the song "Problem Child." That's right. I was like, there's a Beach Boys song on here. And then also "Born to Be Wild" is on here too by Steppenwolf. There's a lot of different things happening here with the music. But yeah, then there's an Iggy Pop song, "Real Wild Child" too. So yeah, they really leaned the music really goes through a certain trend here.
So shortly after being introduced to Junior, we're introduced to the couple of Ben and Flo, and they are at a doctor's office in the waiting room, trying to pick out baby names. Obviously, other people in there waiting are already pregnant. They're just being optimistic. But when they go in, they get the news from the doctor that the test results are positive, which is a bad thing. There's some good Who's on First comedy they ring out of that. But he explains it, goes, no, you are positively infertile. And then there's this whole gag where he pulls out a model of like a woman's reproductive areas and he keeps dropping the pieces and juggling them. It's fantastic. it's dark. Like, this movie is still like in this dark, like it's, we're talking about a woman being infertile and like talking very callously about her eggs that she doesn't have. And but I found it very funny. Like, so far in this movie, I'm on board. Like, it is dark, but that's okay if that's what we're going for here. And my brain, by this point, I'm like, oh, did I totally not understand this movie as a kid? Like, did it really have this layer of like satire on top? Is this like a black comedy and I just didn't recognize it? So far, that is the case, and I'm on board. I really love the line where after she says, the doctor says you're infertile, Flo goes, "You mean we've been doing it every night for nothing?" And John Ritter just has this look on his face like, well, come on, it wasn't for nothing. And that's when I start thinking like, well, wait a minute. What am I going to be rooting for here? Like, obviously they're not a good couple. She's not a good woman, and it only gets worse from there. It's a problem the movie doesn't quite solve. But again, I'm genuinely enjoying the humor of the movie so far.
Yeah, it's obviously, this is, like I said, it feels like we're kind of deliberately over the top. We're leaning into it, like we're kind of the idea that we're potentially like taking the piss out of like the fun family comedy of the hijinks and the Dennis the Menace type thing of like, let's actually dive into this. But then, like you said, the movie goes to some strange places to do that.
I just want to knock out a bunch of lines that I like, that are funny, that I will probably have to censor. I'll just do them all here early on, because it's still like early in the movie. We see some news footage of the bow tie killer getting put to a cop car, and he's saying, "I'm not a bad guy, I'm just misunderstood." And then the news anchor comes on and goes, he'll be facing an increased sentence for attempted prison rape. And then it just moves on. It just cuts away at that point, and just the juxtaposition for him saying he's not a good guy, and then they actually say those words right after it. I love the first time we're in Big Ben's store, and over like the speakers in the store, there's like a ad playing that's like, Big Ben's is 100% American, and it cuts to Big Ben saying, "I'm selling the store to the Japanese." He doesn't say Japanese, but I'm not going to say what he says.
Oh yeah.
Very funny juxtaposition there. And let's see, what else early on. Junior says to Gilbert Gottfried, who's asked him, "What's so funny?" And he says, "You are, you stupid dick." It's like, what? And then the best one, Andrew. Maybe best isn't how I should say this, but the reveal of Junior's room at Ben and Flo's house, they're like, it's filled with clowns. Like, they went so over the top with like clown decor and decoration, like clown wallpaper, clown toys, and big animatronic clowns. And throughout the movie, Junior does like this narration. He's just commenting on what we're seeing. And on the reveal of this room, he says in his narration, "Oh my God, they're retarded." I will bleep that. I just could not believe that was. I laughed so hard, and God, believe me, I censored that for a reason. Like, that is wrong. You don't say that. Part of that is just in 1990, maybe weren't as sensitive to it, but I think even then, that's pretty extreme. I mean, I was so unprepared for that.
Yeah, that's the nice way of putting that.
But look, the thing is, if the movie had stuck to that tone, I think we're rocking here. Like, I think, like, I get it. It would not have been a hit. It would not have been successful, but it would have been probably a pretty funny, pretty edgy satire, black comedy from the early 90s. But they add all the family friendly stuff. They add the stuff of him, like I said, running around the orphanage, making the nuns trip, and the birthday party scene, which I picked as my favorite scene, is a scene that was specifically added after the disastrous test screenings to make it more hijinksy, more family friendly, more aimed towards the kids, and that works too. And it's just together where you run into those problems. Like, you can't just swing back and forth between those two. But to me, this, I know, hashtag positive podcast, don't worry. This movie isn't like, oh man, I would say it's not a dumpster fire, but it is. But I'm really fascinated by it. I'm really fascinated by the end result. I'm fascinated by so much. Like the swinging back and forth between those two tones is just wild to watch. But this was a hit movie. That's the thing that I'm really struggling with here. Like people saw this movie and didn't go, "What the hell was that?" They were like, oh, "Yeah, that was a good time." Like they were probably taking their kids to see it. It ended up playing on TV a ton.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a thing, Andrew. This movie is like a weird anomaly because I will say, and I know I've been rambling. I'll let you jump in here in a minute, Andrew. But of all the movies we covered so far this month, usually I'm saying, well, 0% seems extreme. And Wagons East, I think it's a pretty funny movie. It's crazy that they got no positive reviews. Highlander 2, I understand a little bit more. But I feel like it's more like fans of the first one going to rally against it. Wouldn't be surprised if a handful of critics gave it a passable thumbs up. This movie, I get it. I get why it's got a 0%. Like it's bonkers. These two things they're trying to do should not work together, and they don't. Hashtag PP.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a very, reading about it a little bit more was illuminating, and just seeing how wild the tone shifts are. It's like and like, the way like Flo's character is, like it's like a perfect like parody of like a Stepford Wife type thing. So there's all this stuff in the movie that is this like almost perfect parody of like the setups and the expectations of like, the idea of a couple adopting a child and the mom being so uptight or so vain that she has a portrait of only herself on the wall, not her husband, just her. Like that's like perfect satire of like that type of thing, or like not even necessarily satire, but just like I said, making fun of the concept. But then like there's these moments where it like shifts and it has to do this like, and even just the idea of the finale of this being that, it actually like doing the classic like we overcome all the hijinks and I save the kid, like that it veers into as like as kind of classic an ending as you get with this kind of story. So it's like the movie can't quite navigate what it wants to be. And like you said, certain scenes were added kind of after the test screenings, and I think that possibly had a factor in like why we end up with this tone. Like kind of shifting back and forth where they were like, okay, we need more hijinks, so we'll put in more of that, or we need more like. So anyway, yeah, I understand the reception of this one, and I understand why it is the way it is, but it is a very, very weird movie.
The other movie that's in here fighting to come out, like so we talked about the dark comedy as originally intended, but also there's like the family comedy and the genuine, oh, this kid's tough, but we're going to come around and love him and become a family. And John Ritter is so good being the heart of that. And he's the last one to like really get pushed to his limits. And he gets pushed so far that they're at a church and he goes in the confessional and doesn't realize Junior's on the other side. And he's like, I give up. I can't do it. We have to send him back. And it's like, he's not happy about it, but he's like, I'm not cut out for this. This can't work. And Junior on the other side is like streaming tears because he said that we would be together forever. And he's heartbroken. He's gone through this again. And it's like a genuine emotional moment. He decides not to give up Junior while they're in the adoption agency. He finds out he's been returned 30 times. So he's like, wait a minute, we can't do this. And he snaps out of it. And shortly after that, he walks into Junior's room holding a pillow because he's going to smother the child. This is after the serial killer shows up and he's been pushed too far. The serial killer has sex with Flo in the kitchen.
The serial killer shows up right after he tries to kill him with a pillow. That's what stops. Like,
he's
standing above him with the pillow, and it's the arrival of the serial killer that makes the kid get up and be like, oh, what's that? Yeah.
My overall point is, you can't have the scene at the church where you're almost making me cry with this kid. To the serial killer shows up, has sex with the wife, and he tries to smother the kid with a pillow. When he finds out his wife and son have been kidnapped, he jumps for joy and starts singing. Like both of those can work, but the fact that they're in the same movie, almost back to back, is why you gotta watch this movie. Like, it's so wild that this exists. And again, hit movie. I will say it again. Made a lot of money. Well remembered by many people. Hit film. It is a hell of a thing, Andrew.
Yeah, man, this is a weird one. I don't know how else to put it. It's got so much going on that it just can't. It's odd. That's about all I can say.
I think we've summed up our feelings and we can move on and we can get to the final segment of this episode. But I just want to say, there's a scene where Junior is at a circus and he swings with the trapeze family. And it is so clearly a grown man.
Yes,
as a stunt man.
Definitely.
It is very funny.
Yeah. Sorry. I've been popping through the movie while we've been talking, and I just pulled up the trapeze scene, and you're right, it is so clearly a man. Like, it's not a child. Like, it's so clearly
it's not even like
man.
a little person. It's just a grown man.
It's just a grown man.
Andrew, we only have one movie left for 0% month. 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not sure this is a category we will revisit simply because Wikipedia, they have a nice, concise list of all the films with a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And some of them are like things you've never heard of. And like, I don't know how much juice is going to be left in this fruit, but I think the 4 that we chose are pretty good. And, although the ridiculous 6 is in there, and I fought for that to be included this month. It didn't make the cut, but we'll get around to that one, I think.
I'm sure there's a Sandbox month coming.
Like I said, one movie left, but before we get to that, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do exactly that by hopping into our Discord server. There's a link to join us right there in the podcast notes. Go ahead, click on it. Hop in there, join the community, hang out, leave questions, just like that guy in Doom has done. Here's what they have to say. Do you think movie studios are moving in the right or wrong direction when it comes to catering to fans? For example, fans demanding the Snyder Cut, them swearing it doesn't exist, and then it gets used as HBO Max bait. Or Paramount changing how Sonic looks after the first trailer is released. Sony essentially erasing Ghostbusters Answer the Call with the legacy sequel Ghostbusters Afterlife. More recently, I hear the shelved Acme movie with John Cena was unshelved after the people got angry with Warner Bros. For shelving yet another completed movie. See what happened to Batgirl. Andrew, this seems topical. We talked about a couple of these movies earlier this episode. Right or wrong direction? That's a very broad question, and I'm very scared to definitively answer it. Is your gut telling you one way or another, Andrew?
I think it's a tough thing because I don't know that there's a yes or no answer to this, because I think certain things can be done appropriately, whereas for me it's very much a case by case kind of thing. Like, obviously, yeah. Sonic, I think, is an instance where you had a fan response, a studio that heard that fan response, and they adjusted accordingly. And largely, I don't really have a problem with what happened with Sonic. I think when that trailer came out, people were like, I think it generally was people just being like, this looks really weird. Like, why would you do it this way? And obviously Sony was kind of like, okay, we'll not do that. Because I think that is something where obviously they wanted the movie to be a success, and it was. They're up to their third one now. and now we get dual Jim Carreys in the third installment, which who wouldn't be excited about that? Whereas something like, say, I don't know that I want to go too deep into either of these because the discussions around them are so full of vitriol. Whereas I think something like the Snyder Cut sits in a very weird spot, because the Snyder Cut was something that exist is a tough term, because did Zack Snyder have a cut of the movie himself that he made? Yes. It 100% never didn't exist. Was it finished? No. That was the thing that was missing, and that's why Warner Brothers spent $40 million more finishing it. Now, putting that movie out there, I think, was... This is just my opinions now, folks. Don't get too upset. I don't think the notion of putting out that movie for the fans to kind of cap off that experience is inherently a bad thing. I think it ran into more problems when Zack Snyder put in a bunch of teases for the future. He spoke very openly about how they kiboshed a Green Lantern cameo that he wanted to do, and he almost quit the movie over it. It's almost like there's a hidden episode of this show where we talk about the Snyder Cut, where we probably go through a lot of this stuff. But overall, I had more issues with that one because it felt like Zack Snyder appeared to be taking advantage of the situation. And it created a lot more discourse, and it created a lot more arguing over the future of the DC movies.
With if you give a mouse a cookie situation.
Yes.
Because the fans just go from release the Snyder Cut to restore the Snyderverse. And it's like,
right.
Well, no. We released a cut of the movie that we scrapped. We let him finish it. This is the thing. But you're right. It leads to more. So, I don't know. I never want to side with fans because fans are the worst. But in general, case by case, like you said, is a good example of that. I like the Sonic thing because they pushed the movie back 3 months. They gave animators time. Now, I do think that Animation House went bankrupt, but it's not because of what happened here. That's just because of the state of the industry and how we treat it.
Right. There's a much greater epidemic in the industry. That's the cause. That's the bit of that. But yeah, Ghostbusters is a tougher one for me to talk about because you can't mention there's a Ghostbusters subreddit. You can't mention 2016 now, still 8 years later, without people reminding you that it sucks and that they don't like it and it killed the franchise. And
I don't think they're listening. Oh, God. Okay, so let me ask you this, Andrew.
Yes.
They released that big Ghostbusters fancy box set.
Mm-hmm.
It did not include Ghostbusters 16.
No, it did not.
Some people did complain. They included it as a digital copy, clearly after the fact. But would you say not including it in that box set was quote unquote listening to the fans? Do you think they didn't include it?
That is why the Ghostbusters conversation gets so murky. Because most people will say that box set is for it feels stupid saying this out loud, the prime Ghostbusters universe. Basically, that box set was only supposed to be the 84 movie universe, basically. It was those movies, and that was all it was supposed to be. Now, I think that very much was intended to cater to the fans that wanted Ghostbusters Afterlife. And so they were going to get a box set that was those 3 movies and nothing else. And they didn't want 16 to be in it. I know people who do not enjoy 16 and are in that group that kind of want you to know that it's not Ghostbusters. And I'm like, it kind of is. Says Ghostbusters on it. Pretty sure that's all that it takes. But Ghostbusters is a weird one because you say listening to the fans. What is listening to the fans? It's getting a legacy sequel to your movie after 2016 doesn't do very well, and then wanting to ignore 16's existence. I think, like you said, there is an argument to be made that exclusion of that movie is listening to the fans.
But they also added the digital download to also,
which cost them nothing.
Listen to the fans. But I mean, that's also a response to complaining.
it was a way to try to have it both ways.
Yeah.
Because now the box set with the physical movies was still only the prime Ghostbusters movies. And if you wanted 16, there's a digital code for you, which you would assume most people that like 16 would already have. But also, even if it had been included, like, all the special features and everything were for the original movies. I think Star Wars is another great example of, like, is the rebuke of Last Jedi listening to the fans? And I think this is more indicative of a problem when you are dealing with a situation where the fandom is split. Something like Sonic, that Sonic appearance was basically panned by most everyone. There was not like some large group of people that were like, yeah, it'll probably be fine.
Yeah, I like the new look.
Like, I to be fair, I didn't have any hard feelings about it because I don't have any hard feelings about Sonic, really. But largely, everybody was in agreement. This, at bare minimum, looks really weird. I don't know why you did this. Yeah. And so they responded. They fixed it. Now, something with like Ghostbusters or, say, Star Wars, you've got these much more split fandoms. And I think the problem, Ghostbusters, I will admit, as a diehard fan of Ghostbusters 16, we are the minority group there. I largely. I have no real delusions necessarily saying that, so I guess I sort of on a cosmic level understand why Sony is like, well, let's just make a box set for all the movies that those guys wanted. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that that's the wrong move, but from a, like I said, a corporate perspective, I understand why you do it that way. Something like Star Wars, I think, runs into a much bigger problem because, like, Last Jedi has a very split response. It's basically half and half down the middle of, like, you liked it or you didn't like it. So by rebuking Last Jedi, which they did in Rise of Skywalker, I don't care what anybody says. Again, these are my opinions and my opinions alone. You spurn the fans that did like Last Jedi. But in the process, they made a movie that the people who didn't like Last Jedi didn't like either. And so you made a movie where you tried to please everyone, and in the process, essentially pleased no one. And that, to me, is more indicative of the slippery slope of appeasing fandoms.
I think that's yes. I think what they did with Rise of Skywalker is a great example of listening to fans gone wrong. A bad, because most of these I think we're agreeing are good moves. Like, yeah, it's cool. Release a Snyder Cut, fine, let them have it. Redo Sonic to make fans happy, great. But the way they altered the course, God, we have an whole episode about it. We don't need to get into it, but
right.
Yes, I think that's yeah. Fans are out of control.
It like I said, I think it depends on what the fan reaction is. Like, releasing the Snyder Cut in itself didn't hurt anything. The Snyder fans got to see their Justice League movie as he intended. So with something like the Snyder Cut, I didn't have a problem with it being released. I still don't have a problem with it existing, really. My problem more was that, like, Snyder kind of baited the fans with, like, the extra stuff, the future teases, and kind of the threatening to quit over the Green Lantern thing. I was like, okay, man, like, they're giving you, like, $40 million to finish your little superhero movie. Like, just calm down. Like, you know, and then obviously the fandom responded to all the teases with, like, well, clearly you got to let him do more. And it just became, like you said, that was a give a mouse a cookie, you know, give an inch, take a mile type thing. And with something like Sonic, you had a unified group that largely was like, okay, nobody likes this, so let's fix it. And I think in a situation where, like, you make a misstep and the studio is willing to be like, yo, are bad, and they fix it and now have a relatively successful franchise on their hands, I think the fandom will be largely forgiving of that. Now, the problem what you run into with Ghostbusters and Star Wars and things like that is that you don't quite have that unified front. And so Ghostbusters has a lot bigger problems. I actually could do a whole dissertation on the state of the Ghostbusters franchise, but largely my thing about Ghostbusters that I will say is I don't know that franchise has the casual interest the diehard fans think it has. There is a belief that everybody is interested, essentially. Basically, if you make a Ghostbusters movie, everybody's going to be interested. And I just think that if you look at 16, Afterlife, and Frozen Empire, you can kind of say, not really. And I say this as like a diehard fan of Ghostbusters, but like Ghostbusters Afterlife made like 175 million, or it was a COVID movie, so it's probably even less. But Frozen Empire made like 200 million even off a $100 million budget. Like, it's strained to get to like the break even point. And it had Paul Rudd and it had the previous people from the other movie. Like, it had generally, you believed everything going for it. And then obviously word of mouth wasn't very good. The reviews were pretty mixed, but
there's never been Indiana Jones problem, right? I mean, Dial of Destiny struggled
good reviews, but nobody cared. Like, solid reviews for Dial of Destiny, at least. But like, nobody seems super interested in watching another Indiana Jones movie, because guess what? It's been 16 years since the last one. And that's obviously, you can point to trends in the studio and the theatrical model as well. Just the idea that we've got declining things. People don't go to the movies unless they think it's a must see, which is why something like Deadpool and Wolverine makes $1 billion. But something like, say, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire struggles to make 200 million, which 200 million is nothing to be upset about. It's just clearly, not what they were hoping for. And so to me, the response of the fans is kind of indicative of how I feel. Sonic, to me, is an instance where I think it's fine. Largely. Generally everybody hated it, went out just fine. Snyder Cut, I'm probably like 80-20 on like, it's fine. The 20 is mostly the stuff that Snyder himself did to kind of work the fans. And he did it on purpose. I know he did. Which, whatever. If they're going to give you the money to do it, I guess do it. Like, it's that other kind of thing. Like, if I were in the same spot, would I have not done that? I don't know. I can't say. I've never had my movie taken away from me due to a family tragedy and then had fans rally around me getting to finish it, which is cool. I just wish some of them weren't such toxic jerks about it. But Star Wars, I think, is definitely the ultimate example of doing it wrong, where you've got a split fandom, and versus trying to kind of stick the landing and go with what you were doing, you try to change the whole thing, and in the process, you make everybody sad. And yeah, it's a tough thing. But ultimately, as you can see, it's a slope. And I think where you end up on that slope depends largely on where the problem is. If the fans are unified, a change is usually going to be welcomed. If it's split and your changes too much, I think you're going to fracture that fandom even further, like Star Wars did, to where now almost any Star Wars project is thrown under a microscope and, Zapruder filmed basically by certain groups of fans just looking to be upset at it. And it is, fans are the worst, man.
So bad. Fans are the worst. Just because, we brought it up earlier and he brought it up now. Yes, Batgirl and Acme should absolutely be released. It's sad that it even takes a fan petition to make it happen, and it hasn't happened. I mean, Batgirl, I've given up hope on actually ever being released, which is horrible. Acme sounds like it's been shopped around and they just haven't taken any of the distributing deals. Maybe we'll see it one day, but it's what happened to those two movies is insane, and the outcry is justified. I hope those, the voices, the fans get rewarded in that case.
Zaslav.
Andrew, one movie left for 0% month. A movie I'm so excited to finally watch. I have always been intrigued by this movie. I remember the ads, I remember the trailers. I didn't catch it in theaters. A few people did. I remember seeing it at Blockbuster and always being like, it looks so cool though. It looks so stylish. I like these actors. And I never got around to watching it. But now I will, because we have to.
You will.
Ballistic. X versus Sever. God, that title. Who's X? Who's Sever? What's their history? I can't wait to find out. We're talking about it next week. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. hit film, it is a hell of a thing, Andrew.
Yep. It's a movie. It's a movie where John Ritter gets cucked, but it is by Michael Richards. Like so. Oh my god.